Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Go to underdogfantasy.com right now. Use promo code ROSTER to get a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. They're running a cool Superflex tournament right now that you can go check out over there. And we have some best ball stuff that we want to talk about today, as well as some early redraft stuff and some dynasty stuff with one of our favorite guests, a repeat guest, one of the most popular guests that we've had here on the radio, I guess the podcast performance. His name is Jason Moore. You know him very well from on Twitter at JasonFFL. He's with the Fantasy Footballers. Jason, great to see you, brother. What the hell's going on with you, man?
Oh man, so much as we're approaching draft season. Busy times are ramping back up. The early off season where we've got a little reprieve. That's over. We're in go mode.
You start to see those podcast numbers ticking back up, man. People are starting to get interested again, Jason, and nobody better to have on than you here. I wanted to mention just right off the bat, you guys right now, it's not really the heart of business season or anything, but you guys do have the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus available right now at the Fantasy Footballers. That also has, well, you mentioned it has some dynasty stuff as well as the redraft.
Yeah, if you're playing Dynasty, we've got our Dynasty Pass available now, where you can look at all of our Dynasty rankings, our prospect, grades and models, and all of that type of stuff for us degenerate Dynasty people.
And Lord knows that there are a bunch of them listening here. So it's a fantasy podcast in the middle of April. So, let me ask you this: speaking of Dynasty degenerates, I have JkDobbins in a bunch of my dynasty leagues. We're super interested in him as a prospect coming out, but clearly it's been a bit of you get year one out of him where it wasn't what anybody expected. Year two, of course, the injury. And now with the word that, who knows if Melvin Gordon's going to go to the Ravens or not. But if just the fact that they were sniffing around him gave me the same sort of vibes that I got whenever Buffalo was sniffing around J.D. McKissick. That I started thinking about Devin Singletary. I'm like, what does this mean about what they think about Singletary? Does this whole stuff about Baltimore sniffing around Melvin Gordon make you nervous about JkDobbins? And what was your outlook on him before any of this news, if it didn't matter?
It hasn't really changed my opinion much because I knew for sure that they were going to bring someone in. You just cannot, as an NFL team. You've got a great duo here in JkDobbins and Gus Edwards. They're great, but their timeline says they're not ready to go. You can't go into a training camp without running backs available to go. So you have to bring other bodies in. Now, if they signed Melvin Gordon, that would be worse than if they bring in a Joe Schmo or get a day 3 running back on the roster. I don't think they're going to bring in Melvin Gordon, which, of course, I'm sure the news will break immediately.
That's what I was worried. I haven't checked the news in the last hour, so I was worried you say, Alex, they actually signed Melvin Gordon. Man.
Yeah, I'm sure it's set to break any minute. This, to me, was like, it's kind of like the Leonard Fournette at the Patriots thing, where it's like, hey, other teams are showing interest. Denver, you want me back or not? I can go elsewhere. So we'll see. But as far as JkDobbins' value, I thought he had a great rookie year. I know it wasn't the breakout, home run from the get-go. But once he had the opportunity, he showed he's got the stuff. The unfortunate injury. But Dalvin Cook, had the ACL injury at the same age. Todd Gurley had one at that age or younger. Willis McGahee, Jamal Lewis. When you're that young and you have these ACL tears, I think he's got a bright future ahead. Just got to keep pretty much only Melvin Gordon away, because I don't think there's anyone else. I don't think they're going to spend the draft capital on a Breece Hall. So they'll bring in a mediocre running back to mix in, or a draft pick that won't matter, and that's my expectation still.
So all right, so with JkDobbins, you do have the worries about returning from the injury, even though it will be basically a year by then, right? But I guess if you wanted to come in July, that'll be more like 10 and a half, 11 months. So yeah, you're on the wrong side of that timeline. So if you take all that into consideration, let me ask if you would consider these guys who are going on Underdog Fantasy later than JkDobbins, at least based on all of the trailing ADP data. What about James Conner? Do you like James Conner more than J.K.
Far more. If we're not talking dynasty, if we're talking
we're just talking redraft.
If we're talking redraft, James Conner has the ability. I mean, he was the running back 5 last year. He scored 7 fantasy points more per game in the 5 games when Chase Edmonds was not in the lineup. So he dominated, and now Chase Edmonds is gone. I'm sure they'll bring in another back, but James Conner looks really hot with this Arizona offense.
How about Josh Jacobs?
Josh Jacobs is a great name. I think him and jkdobbins, that's an argument to be had. It's a matter of which offense do you believe in more, and I think I lean towards the Raiders. That might surprise you that I like, with Devontae Adams and that division having to keep up with those quarterbacks. I will take a slight edge to Josh Jacobs.
And then just one more. This is a grouping that I've had trouble parsing through myself. What about Elijah Mitchell?
Oh man,
where would you have him in that sort of totem pole of
I hate ranking Elijah Mitchell. I have
it's
him.
Hard, isn't it?
It's the worst because here's the deal. He's awesome. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be like a top 10 running back, but then somehow by the end of the year, someone who has never been a name will be the running back one for the San Francisco 49ers. So hard to trust Kyle Shanahan's. I would still have to take Elijah Mitchell as the roster stand now. But I guess the reality, if this is underdog, if I'm doing an underdog draft, I do think at the end of the year, with moves and transactions yet to be made, I think J.K. Dobbins finishes higher. So I'll take J.K. Dobbins in that format. Now, come draft season, if the rosters are still how it is now, I would switch.
Fair enough. What about so you're not out on J.K. Dobbins. Are you finally out on Miles Sanders? Like I'm trying to figure out whether I'm just out on Miles Sanders. What is your book on him? As far as another young running back that came in, had some juice to end his rookie year, but since it's been pretty disastrous.
Yeah, I mean the rushing touchdowns for the team was fantastic, and for their best running back was horrific. I'm not out on Miles Sanders. I still think he's got talent. He's looked good. Towards the second half of the year, the Eagles really started running the ball. Now, I wouldn't be surprised. They are a team that could go out there and draft a Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and really say, we're planning for after you, because he's been a bust so far for sure. But I do think that if things stay status quo there, I'm not going to be out on Miles Sanders. He should have good fantasy production, and I haven't seen anything on film to say he can't.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, on film, I guess I haven't either. It's just it feels like he's always a victim of circumstance. It feels like it's always something. And
eventually, you blame yourself for not learning your lesson. I totally get that. He is one of those players where it's like, look, I know you should be good, but I got to stop falling for that trap. And if you fall for the trap again, it's like shame on me. But I'm gonna fall. I'm gonna fall for the trap.
Is Alvin Kamara a trap in 2022? And here was my specific question for you, because I wonder this: what worries me more about Kamara? Because I have two significant worries. One is the fact that people don't seem to be talking about the fact that at the Pro Bowl he had that deal in Las Vegas where he punched some dude out. And I mean, I don't know what how hard the NFL is going to come down on him for that, or make an example of him for that. And there's also the stuff about no more Sean Payton. It's a new offense and everything. Is there one of those things that worries you more? And then kind of where are you on Kamara? Because it just doesn't feel like to me in these early redraft leagues and these early best ball stuff that people are really pricing in the fact that he could miss between 2 and 6 football games.
Yeah, I think the expectation here with the type of assault he had, I have been having an expectation of one missed game. That's
one missed game. Okay.
That's how I think it will come down. He'll miss a game and play the majority of the season. I'm not so much worried about the Sean Payton factor. Drew Brees having left last year and the tumult at quarterback really showed how crappy the Saints offense can be. And during that time, while they had no Michael Thomas, had no other weapons, on a per-game basis, Alvin Kamara was still the running back 5. He was averaging over 5 targets a game with Winston, who now projects to be the quarterback. And the trade they just made, we're going to find out here in a couple of weeks what it really means. There's kind of 2 branches of thought. One branch is that they're adding capital so that they can go after their quarterback because they need to replace, and this is maybe one of those pre-draft maneuvers to get more capital to make a big trade up and get your quarterback. I don't think this is the class for it. They also signed Andy Dalton, so as a backup to signing Jameis Winston, I think they're in it to win it now. I think they want another draft pick because they're like, our defense is good and we need offensive weapons. If they get Michael Thomas back and they use a first-round pick on some good wide receiver, that wide receivers that are in this class, I think their offense could take a step forward from the albatross it was last year. In which case, more scoring opportunity for Kamara. So I am not. I'm not down on Kamara either. I think he should have a good year. But they are a team to watch for. One of the more surprising, like, spend up on a running back picks. You don't consider them because they've got Kamara, but with Ingram behind them and Tony Jones, they really did not want to give Ingram Kamara the work he got last year. I don't think his body's going to hold up.
Right, and Ingram is on contract for another year. I think that they can get out of that thing, and I'm not sure. And you've seen some of these mock drafts in like the second and third round with the Saints taking a guy like Brian Robinson and stuff like that. I mean, you could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think they just restructured Ingram's deal to save some cap space for the Winston thing. So I think he's pretty much under contract.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's a good call. And the only other thing that I would mention about Kamara that worries me is, of course, no more Teron Armstead. I mean, that's a whole different deal having James Hurst over there at the left tackle.
That is actually a legitimate one. It's funny, today we were talking about it's funny how, like, we'll talk about, Miami's offensive line, they got better. This is such a good, but it's like we don't talk about the loss as much as we do. Last year, it was like the Chargers' offensive line got so much better. But those pieces came from other locations, and I don't think we as a community and me as an analyst, I don't do a good enough job factoring in the losses. I only look at, like, the additions to the offensive line.
Right. Well, and certainly there were some there's a big addition for the Tampa Bay Bucks, with them getting back Tom Brady. They also got back Leonard Fournette. I just wanted to ask you, just your intuition, having done this for a really long time, just kind of rounding out my talk about running backs before I wanted to ask you about some receivers and get you out of here. What about Leonard Fournette? He to me was, I see him going all over the place in best ball leagues. And his ADP, if you look at the ADPs, like it's not going to be indicative of where he's really going right now, because there's so much trailing data from before we had any definitive news that he was going to be coming back to Tampa Bay. And we didn't know that Ronald Jones wouldn't be there and stuff like that. There's like 2 months of people drafting without those data points, right? I see him go somewhere. I see him going now in the third round, in these best ball drafts. I just wonder if I put the over-under at pick 2.09 in a 12-team half-point PPR league, whether you think by the time we get to the heart of redraft season, when all of the the time of year, our busiest time of year, all our friends are calling us, our moms and our dads and our uncles are calling us. Everybody's asking, what do I do in my draft? Do you think that Leonard Fournette at 2.09 in a 12-team league, over or under?
I think he'll be drafted higher than that, and I think he should be drafted higher than that. First 3 weeks of last year, he wasn't the guy. Week 3, I think he was like 30% snap. That's probably low. No, he was 36% snap. In that week, and then starting week 4, it kind of made that shift where Ronald Jones was dead to them, and he went to 82% snap share, and the rest of the way was 80s, 60s, high usage for Leonard Fournette. During that stretch, which was the majority of the season, weeks 4 through 15, the vast majority of the season, he was the running back 3. He's catching the ball. He's on a great offense. Now Ronald Jones isn't there. I wouldn't draft him as the running back 3, but he is certainly – I think he'll be underdrafted in drafts this year because of fatigue on the name. Leonard Fournette's someone we're pretty much always just waiting to just die off. I was so unhappy when he re-signed with Tampa because I wanted Breece Hall to go there. And
oh, God.
But it's another year of – and also because I traded Leonard Fournette away when I thought he was nothing, and – whoops.
There you go. Hey, just going back a little. One more thing on the running backs. Those running backs that we were talking about earlier, that cluster I was asking you about, that James Conner, J.K. Dobbins, kind of Josh Jacobs, Elijah Mitchell area. Like Breece Hall is sight unseen. Do you put him in above those guys?
I would put him above those guys. Yeah, I am a big believer. Obviously, we don't know the landing spot, TBD on changing. But if I'm drafting right now on an underdog platform, I am taking the chance at a great season. I think we are now at a decade, 10 years in a row, where there have been at least 2 rookie running backs to finish in the top 24. 2 years ago, we had 5. Rookie running backs scored a lot of fantasy points, and Breece Hall is the best rookie running back this year.
And of course, Jason at Jason FFL, Jason from the Fantasy Footballers, he mentioned Underdog, and just let me tell you really quick about Underdog Fantasy, because the NFL draft season is underway, and you can already draft in 2022 fantasy leagues on Underdog Fantasy to win cash prizes through their slick mobile app and user-friendly site. You can join a league and draft a team in minutes. Plus, the folks at Underdog are going to help you get started with a deposit match of up to $100 in bonus cash when you sign up and make your first deposit with promo code ROSTER. So just visit underdogfantasy.com, take Breece Hall, in the 5th round is where you can get him right now. So you could download it in the App Store, Google Play, etc. Sign up with promo code ROSTER, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code ROSTER. All right, Jason, I got to ask you about some of these wide receivers. First of all, everybody laughs at me whenever I say, is Matt Ryan really that big of an improvement for Michael Pittman whenever Carson Wentz would just look at him all the time and just not seemingly have eyes for anybody else? I know Carson Wentz sucks and everybody loves to hate him, but God, man, he sure did look for Pittman a ton. I mean, is there any sense in me thinking that maybe his target volume comes down just because he's a new quarterback that doesn't love the guy so much?
I don't think there's a lot of sense in that, just because of the depth chart. I mean, you can blame Carson Wentz. Maybe it was Carson Wentz that only had eyes for Pittman, or maybe it was Carson Wentz was good and he could see the other wide receivers out there. Right. And while Pascal was okay, he's not even on the roster now. So Pittman you just do the roster construction thing and you start putting target market shares together, and you're like, I just don't see how he doesn't get a great market share from whoever the quarterback is. So now it's a matter of, well, who's a better quarterback? And that can be a debate at this point in their careers between Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz. But I would lean towards Matt Ryan. I know he had a bad year last year, but he didn't have Calvin Ridley or Julio or any of those, and he didn't have an offensive line. Now, Matt Ryan behind a good offensive line, I think Michael Pittman should go up from last year, especially as he goes into year 3 and just continues progressing as an NFL player.
You mentioned Calvin Ridley, and this isn't a question I told you I was going to ask, but would you take it? Would you take Calvin Ridley for a 2022 second round dynasty rookie pick right now?
Oh, that's really hard. If it was a late end second, that's where usually you see the hit rates dropping well below like 30%.
Especially this year. Things really drop off around pick 17.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where you have to be specific about what second rounder it is. A top end second, I still think there's guys that I'm going to like there more. Towards the back of the second, sure, I would take the chance, because I do think he comes back and plays next year. You saw some indications through the whole suspension that his plan was to come back, play football for another team, which takes a little bit of that worry out. Like, it used to be, will he ever even play again? So You're taking on a massive risk. Now it's like, well, he probably will play again. It's just going to have to wait a year. But he's going to be out of football a year, I think 29 at that point, and on a new team. So he's not going to be the same Calvin Ridley he was, but whatever you're getting at the back of the second is probably nothing.
Really hard to trust, right? But like you said, it's at that point the opportunity cost just really isn't too much. What about your trust in Kadarius Toney? We saw last year, man, that guy, the Kadarius Toney roller coaster, man. That sure was an experience having that guy. What do you think about Toney this year? Or do you even think about Kadarius Toney, and what is your level of trust in him?
I do not trust. That word is great. I have no trust for Kadarius Toney. I have no trust for the Giants offense. I think that there's a chance they are among the worst in the league this year. I'm not believing that Saquon is back. The offensive line doesn't look impressive. They haven't done anything to make me a believer, and the quarterback is still Daniel Jones. So while Kadarius Toney, man, he showed flashes of brilliance, just electric. It's really like the only time I can remember on an NFL field being like, oh, he looks kind of Tyreek-esque on an NFL field. Yeah. That was great, but it's really, really hard to put your trust in the Giants. So I find that I will probably be looking elsewhere from Kadarius Toney, but the ceiling is very, very high if it hits.
Because Kadarius, I sometimes see Kadarius Toney just really, really falling.
Are you in? Are you in on him?
No, I mean I don't think I'm in on him, but you just see him going in the same time as guys like Brandon Ayuk, or do you like him more than Ayuk? Do you like him more than Ayuk, or like Robert Woods in Tennessee? It's like some of those guys start to think with Ayuk, it's like the target volume for him. It feels like there's no way it can't kind of go down a little bit, next year. And it was hard last year with Debo hogging everything. When I get to that sort of range of these Chase Claypool, who knows who's going to be his quarterback and stuff. Sometimes
when you're in that range, you really should, and you're, obviously in these leagues, you only win by having the highest results. I'm going to swing for the fences there. I would probably pull the trigger on Kadarius Toney over having, the sloppy seconds from A.J. Brown. Or
right.
I love Robert Woods. I've always been a big believer, but, he's a guy that's probably going to crack your lineup a couple of times through the year. And when he does, it's not going to really change the outcome over who he's getting in over. Whereas Kadarius Toney, maybe he has far fewer games, but in a best ball format, when he hits, he's far more likely to have some crazy 25-point game,
or like a 12 target outburst. Robert Woods is not going to have that on the Tennessee Titans. Absolutely not. That's a good call for sure. What about? I wanted to also just ask you about the Tyreek Hill stuff and the sort of the fallout from that. How far did you move Tyreek Hill, or did you move Tyreek Hill down your rankings whenever he moved? And then also just correspondingly, what about like Juju? What about Juju Smith? I'm seeing that I wrote it out here, JJSS and MV. All these guys have two last names, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju
Don't
Smith.
Forget Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, this is hyphenation station. I mean, that's how they're drafting and acquiring players, is how many names you got.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about what did you do with Tyreek? And then also correspondingly, what did you do with Juju and MVS, or those guys that you got more bullish on?
Yeah, this is, with Tyreek specifically, I moved him down to wide receiver 10, which was pretty drastic. He was definitely in the consideration for the number one spot. He was my number 2 beforehand. I can see a world where he falls out of the top 15. Now, I don't have him projected that way. I think he's going to finish around wide receiver 10 because they don't pay that much money and acquire and spend that much draft capital unless they're going to try to turn you into the Debo Samuel. They're going to give you the ball every which way, handoffs galore. They're going to get you in on screens. They're going to target you downfield. He'll have his way with targets, but they're all coming from Tua, not Mahomes, and that will make a huge difference in touchdowns at the very least, let alone everything else, the yardage and the receptions. So I'm significantly down on Tyreek Hill. As far as the other guys, MVS, Juju Smith-Schuster, I've really been taking a hold my breath approach. Like, What are they going to do in the draft? What first rounder are they going to draft? Who's going to fall to them? Because who it is changes, I think, how they scheme the team up. The one thing I will say is I believe in Andy Reid, and he's not going to throw out the same offense that he has with Tyreek Hill without Tyreek Hill. He's not going to just go and try to find his Tyreek Hill replacement and say, this is my offense. He's adapted his offense for his personnel for 20 years, and he's always a step above. And I think Juju Smith-Schuster has shown, like, one of our things to remember leaving this last year is that players that have shown flashes of brilliance on the NFL field in the past, Cooper Kupp, Debo Samuel, like, these guys didn't come out of nowhere. We saw them before, and they had some down period in their career. I'm higher on Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that if one player is going to emerge as a star there, I think it will be him because we've seen him do it before. You don't get – what do you have, like 1,600 yards?
Mm-hmm. It was
You just don't.
He was the number 1 overall pick in Dynasty like 2 or 3 years ago.
And while I'm certainly not banging the drum for that. I don't think he's going to be this top 5 wide receiver with the Chiefs just because he's got Mahomes. He would be the guy I would bet on over MVS, even though they paid MVS more money.
Mm-hmm.
I think they needed that archetype to have the speed to kind of stretch the field. But I think they're going to find ways to work Juju Smith-Schuster out. He got back at the end of last year, and kind of like Derrick Henry. So I think he's over the injury. He would be the one I would believe in the most, just based on having done it on the NFL field before, having Mahomes and having Andy Reid.
All right, one more wide receiver question, and then two big brain busters for you, Jason, before I get you out of here. Finally, just is there? So you guys have the rookie stuff out in the Ultimate Draft Kit and stuff. I'd imagine you've watched at least a few of these top rookies. I'm sure.
Yep.
Is there one rookie wide receiver that you would most like to see with Aaron Rodgers up in Green Bay?
With Aaron Rodgers, yeah, it would be Drake London. I think that I think he's good. He's my number 1 wide receiver for fantasy because I like the bigger bodied guys. You look at the top 20 wide receivers in fantasy football, the guys that have done it. They've already accomplished their goals for fantasy. They're almost all. There's Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, a little smaller, and then it's like everyone else is 200 plus pounds, 210, 220 pounds. So I like the bigger guys, and I think that his perceived lack of perception, which I take a little bit of umbrage with. Aaron Rodgers will rifle the ball in, and he'll catch it, and he'll score a lot of touchdowns. He's not my. I think my favorite wide receiver in this class is Jameson Williams. If he goes to Kansas City, I will be hot and I will be bothered. And then Juju Smith-Schuster can go away. But yeah, I would say Drake London specifically for the Packers. He lines up really good in the way that I see it playing out.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you can absolutely see him. You can see him get down to the 1 yard line, and and Aaron Rodgers just throwing that little 1 yard out to the front pylon to Drake London, and then all the worries that you have about him separating and stuff like that, they'll go out the window. It's like it doesn't matter. He separates with his size, and
just rifle it into where only he can catch it.
It's crazy. All right, again, we're talking with Jason Moore at JasonFFL on Twitter, and of course the Fantasy Footballers, the website, the podcast. You guys have all heard about it, but if not, go give them a listen. All right, who's the player who's going to benefit most in fantasy if their team doesn't draft who has to be Neo in the Matrix, as I always say, who has to dodge the bullets of the draft the most? Who is it who they really, really will benefit most if their team does not draft a good young player at their position?
I see kind of 2 different ways to answer that. Dodging the most bullets to me is Michael Carter. People still love Michael Carter, and they think he's a thing. I see so many people on this year's rookie running backs when they're describing people. There's a lot of undersized running backs, and they're like, well, he could be Michael Carter. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, Michael Carter hasn't done anything yet. This isn't a comp that, I mean, if they go out and they draft a good running back, which I think is highly likely, Michael Carter becomes a backup and isn't anything. So he's got a lot of bullets to dodge, and they've got more draft capital to be scary. But the guy who comes out of the Matrix flying like Neo would be Javonte Williams. I mean, if he comes out of the draft and they have not spent, it's Boone and Javonte and maybe a day 3 guy. Oh, brother. I mean, that's a top 5 running back. Javonte is going to be what Jonathan Taylor was this past year, the guy who's so talented, so young, so great on a per-touch basis. Just give him the rock. Just let him go. And I think Nathaniel Hackett, even though he's got the history of the last few years with Aaron Jones having more of a timeshare, and you're like, give him all the work. Aaron Jones is a small guy. He's not small, 205. Yeah. But Javonte's made for a 3-down work. He's 220 pounds, and if he's the one that's most exciting, like the most to gain is you're talking about a guy who, man, is he the running back 15? Is he the running back 20 if Melvin Gordon comes back? Or is he, are you taking him with the 4th pick in your draft because he's the dude with the Russell Wilson-led Broncos. I'm keeping my both eyes on that probably more than anything.